Good morning. My name is Ryan Freeman. Welcome to my life and welcome back to my bedroom and for another episode in the story of my life. And I had promised in the last episode that I would talk about my religious education in the future episode, and I will do that in the next episode. I wanted to talk first of all about my mother and father because they ended up getting divorced, and that was sort of a big event in my life. So I'll go ahead and talk about what my life was like as a child before they got divorced and then perhaps after they got divorced, and some of the implications and some of my thoughts and feelings on that, because there's a lot of people who get divorced these days and have been for centuries, of course. But obviously much more so as we get to the modern world, divorce and the ramifications and everything surrounding it, both the blessing and curse of it. If you can find a silver lining in breakups, and I believe you can. Maybe not all, everyone is different, and perhaps I'll contrast what I experience with other people that I know. So yeah, this episode will be talking about that. I'm not trying to dig out skeletons to cause pain where there's no need to, but this was a big thing that happened in my life, and I think a lot of people can relate. So with that being said, my early childhood, as I mentioned, was very serene, very nice, and dreamlike. So whether or not it really was, I can't be certain. I would say I loved my mother and father tremendously as a child. Of course, I was a brat and could cry and be mean and whatnot like that. But I remember laying on my parents' bedroom and my dad just telling me, "Isn't your mom the most beautiful woman in the world? Look at her feet. Aren't they beautiful? They smell like roses. Give them a smell." And I was like 4 years old, smelling my mom's feet and going, "Yes, Father, they smell like roses." And they did. I mean, they smelled wonderful. I loved them. My father has changed a lot over his life. We all change to some degree. Some of us change more, depending upon how far we turn off the main trunk of our path in life. My father was tall, dark, handsome, athletic, charismatic. I mean, he was the only father that I knew in my circle of friends who could slam dunk, who got all of the waitresses' attention in the restaurants when we would go. He was the life of the party with the loudest voice. And I think after studying a lot of psychology, I think a lot of it was that he indulged his passions. A lot of civilization is basically a restriction of your passion. I think that's one of the reasons my mom's family was very tame compared to my father's family, is they had a much more, restriction of their passion, live more by a moral code, where my father's family was a little looser with traditional values and conventional attitudes towards life, and sort of followed their passion, which is why they were so chaotic, but also so full of life and vigor. So that's just a side note. I'd like to talk about passion and whatnot. It's a very interesting subject, and I've had my dealings with restricting it and letting it go, and it'll probably come up in this series. I'll leave that at that and continue. So my father was, all boys look up to their father. We all love our fathers, and I loved my father because, I don't know, he was so reassuring. And I remember I used to have nightmares every single night when I was, this was perhaps the most dominant of my early memories, is I would have terrible nightmares every night when I was 3-4 years old. And I even remember the dreams, and I remember, not in such vivid detail, but some of them I did, because it would happen every night with the same characters. Was it Fraggle Rock, perhaps? There were these huge monsters, big fat guys, who would try to eat these little guys, and these big fat monsters were always trying to eat my head. And in my dream, the only person who could save me would be my father. He would be tugging at my legs, pulling me out of the gaping maw of the monster. And when I would wake up in the middle of the night in terror, I would dart to my parents' bedroom, jump in, and feel safe with my father. And so he was my safety rock. My mom was the nurturer. She took care of us, took care of our daily needs. And I think that's probably how a lot of families go, to some extent. Yeah, so, but my father, by indulging his passions, he, and my mom, coming from that very Christian background, sort of Christian values, she didn't really approve of my father in some of his ways. You know, he would, I can't speak for her exactly how she feels, how she thinks, so I'll just give you my opinion. Remember, this is just my perspective in the story. But I do remember coming home with my mom, and my father was having like a loud party with wild guys. Maybe they're watching the boxing fight or something like that, and she would sort of take us upstairs to sort of bring us away from this chaotic maelstrom that she was trying to prevent us from experiencing. And I think that was a big concern and a growing concern. And a lot of times I remember, it's kind of crazy because I don't go back to these memories very often. The next morning, my father sleeping perhaps in another room, and my mom taking me to go see him, and I think he was sort of hungover, and so I think there was a bit of a separation between my father and mother because of his revelries and his friends that he hung out with. I should say that he was a young guy, you know, he was a young... This is my defense of my father, okay? I'll defend my mother as well. So, in my father's defense, and you could tell me your thoughts in the comments if you'd like. You don't have to, but... In my father's defense, he was a good-looking guy, you know, in his 20s. And, you know, wild guys in their 20s, what do they like to do? They like to have fun. From my mom's perspective, you have kids, let's try to present a good image in front of our kids. Let's not get wasted and drunk, and let's show them how to conduct ourselves in life. So I see both points, and I don't know what the right answer is. You know, I have now a family of my own, so I'll have to make a lot of these moral decisions on how I conduct myself in front of my daughter. So it's a tough subject, and it's hard, and I'm not gonna judge my father or mother. It just was what it was, you know. I don't put the blame on anyone, but that was a growing wedge. And I remember we would often go to my grandparents' house, and I think my mother, it happened a lot of the times, perhaps when my mother and father were at odds, or my mother wanted to go see them, because I remember coming out of my grandparents' house and my father would just grip my mother with his hands and just kiss her and look at me and say, and my brother Nathan, and say, you know how much I love your mother, you know how much I love my mother. So with that passion, although it led to chaotic drunken revelries, it was real romance. Like, you never saw that type of affection and love with my other uncles. At least I didn't. So it's sort of a blessing and a curse when you indulge your passions, right? You know, you might do a little crime, but you'll also sing the sweetest song. Probably one of the reasons a lot of actors and singers get themselves into trouble, because I believe that to do art, you do have to let your passion out, right? That's what communicates emotion and vigor in life. But at the same time, it can sweep you away like a stream, and you can find yourself quickly drowning or causing damage. But my mom was not good with that. She didn't approve of my father's lifestyle, and I don't know all of the details, but I believe he did. He philandered. He had intimate associations with other women besides my mom, which is the sine qua non, the greatest sin, especially for Christians, which is infidelity. One of the greatest sins, anything sexual. Any sexual abnormality under the Christian aegis is, it's funny too, because in Christianity they talk about forgiving all sins, don't judge your brother, but when it comes to sex, traditionally, I don't know about today, but traditionally, when it comes to sex, there's not a lot of forgiveness if you go outside of their bounds, and that's also in our culture as well, pop culture, cheating. Every movie, every song, it's about that, and go all the way back to Greek plays. And I'm not trying to defend cheating, and perhaps I'll even do a series on this very topic. It's that it happens so often. It happens so naturally that on the one hand, I sympathize with my mom because that's not fun, but I think there's a bigger story to it, and I'll leave it at that. We're so quick to jump to judgment and say, oh, he cheated, he's a bad guy, but I think the way that most of us collectively, the way we look at these subjects is not with any nuance. It's sort of black and white. And it's not black and white. Life is not black and white. There are factors that go in to everything. And if you heard my mom's side, you might say, yeah, okay, I get your point. But if you heard my dad's side, you might also have a little sympathy. We are but the playthings of the gods. And that's not an excuse to do wrong or to hurt people or anything like that, but there's a lot more complexity to life. So this is not a defense against philandering or adultery or anything like that, but it's also, let's be a little more sophisticated with our understanding of the complexities of human nature. But my mom did not approve of my father's influence, and she wanted, from her own words, to remove us from this model, and so they got divorced. I believe I was 8 years old, around that age. And I don't actually remember how they broke it to us. I have an image of us sitting in the living room. I don't even remember having a deep emotional reaction to it. I just remember reacting to it perhaps emotionally gradually as the years went on with some of the repercussions. My mom got remarried to a hard-working Christian guy, very different than my father. My father, under normal morals, I mean, he wasn't a saint, but he was a lovable guy, like I said, and to this day has a very beautiful heart, but very different than my mom's new husband. My mom's new husband was just a much more similar, perhaps, to her family. Much more rigid, not passionate at all. Hell of a temper. I'm not going to go into people's foibles and whatnot, but very different than my father. Very different than my father. So my mom remarried another man, and before she did, she told me, Ryan, I will not marry this man if you don't give me your approval. If you don't say, it's okay. And I was like, all right, no, don't marry him. Because I still loved my father. I didn't want another person coming into our life at all. Not at all. And I had met this guy, this suitor, so to say, and he was a nice guy, but I didn't want him in my life. But sometimes you don't get what you want in life. Often you don't, especially when you're a kid. So she married him anyways. And so he entered our life. And that was a big adjustment. You know, he was very different than my father. And there's a lot of, I like this guy. He's a nice guy. All right. I'm not going to criticize him at all. But if I were to look at a lot of the problems in my life at that time, it was that. It was this, my father being taken away from me, the guy I love so much, and all of a sudden this guy I don't want in my life, who actually had a lot of criticism for me. He didn't like the way I drank water. He didn't like the way I ate. He didn't like the way I played, you know? So he, although everyone tries to make their best impression when they first meet you, and he did, he was a little more kind when I first met him. You know, eventually, he, as the man of the house, you know, I wasn't his kid. But my mom was making a new life with this guy, so there wasn't much I could do. I will say that the divorce was pretty hard on my brother and I, even though it was a very tame divorce. I have a cousin who had a much worse divorce between his parents. And so whenever I don't feel sorry for myself, because I look at other people, and some people, I like my cousin, for example, who had a worse experience, and then there's people who even had worse experiences, and some people who didn't even have parents. So to even have a father and a mother still in my life, because my dad didn't disappear. He still came around every week, multiple days, to take us to play baseball. See, my father, his dad was a terrible dad, according to him and his brothers and sisters. So he swore to himself he would be the best father possible. So although he lost his wife and his place in the household, he made every effort to be a part of our lives. So coaching our soccer teams or baseball teams, coming during the weekdays to teach us how to hit a baseball or kick the soccer ball or throw a football, taking us to the comic store. I mean, he went above and beyond as a father. He was the best father I could even imagine, and loved us. So Alice, who I talked about in the last video, my grandma Alice, so much love, so much affection. My father had that as well. When he told me, "I love you," I felt that. Whereas when I got it from my mom, and I love my mom, and she loves me, but it was a different kind of love, you know. It wasn't the love that wraps you around like a blanket. It was the love that you know, made sure you had clothes on your back. It was a practical love. And she's a practical woman. My dad's was a passionate love, because he's a passionate man. Two very different ways of parenting and relating. So it's it is what it is, and I'm glad I had my mom, you know, because I might not have gone to school with nice clothes or had my teeth in such good condition, you know. That wasn't what my dad was going to do. But my dad was able to give me that warmth and play and the fun, you know. So I think it's kind of nice to have different people in your life to show you different aspects of human ways of living. And although I did not want my mother's new husband in my life, and although that caused me a lot of problems and pain, and I know it did to my older brother, but I won't speak for him, there was a silver lining in that they had another child. And so I was 10 years old when my little brother Andrew came into the world, and that was amazing, because I hate being a crybaby. You know, I cry a little much, don't I? Not that I think there's a problem with crying, but I guess talking about the beautiful parts of your life, you should cry. But Andrew was the biggest blessing in my life. I just fell in love with this little boy, and being an older brother, because for 10 years before that, I was the younger brother getting my butt beat by my older brother. Had a lot of fun. You know, my older brother was a great was a great guy to grow up with, and we played a lot. But I got my butt beat, and so now I got to be an older brother, and I didn't take out my anger on him. I don't know, man. I just had a good relationship with my little brother Andrew, and so that was a blessing. Always a silver lining on every cloud. And so, although I didn't want my parents to get divorced, although I didn't want my mother to remarry, it happened. Things happen in life. You can't control the stream of life. You got to flow with it. I got a baby brother out of it, which totally worth it, more than worth it, My dad remarried a Jewish real estate agent, very sexy, vivacious, sharp woman, cutting line. She was a very interesting woman. Jackie, love her. She's an amazing woman. But they had a rock and roll relationship. She was attracted to my dad probably for his animal vigor, his passion. And boy, oh boy, in a future episode, I'll tell you some of those stories, or maybe I won't. So I'm going to leave this episode at that. I didn't exactly know where it was going to go. I had a beautiful, serene child memory, dream like where my father was the hero, my mother's feet smelled like roses. Didn't want that to end, even though there was a widening gap between my father's way of life, given into the passions, philandering with women, getting drunk. My mom's way of life, let's make a firm household under Christian morals, no drunken orgies whatsoever. That widening gap was too much, caused the divorce. My mother remarrying, I didn't want that to happen, but I got a baby brother out of it, so that's life. Life goes up and down, and it's a hell of a ride. My name's Ryan Freeman. Thank you for watching. I will see you on the next episode soon.